Down Wanna wait for wrong to pray for someday. Yeah. Broken, open, still hoping something will change. Growing, holding on, they're not the same. At least I know there was love. I know there was love. Once upon a time, I know there was love. Love, I know there was love. Once upon a time, I know there was love. You've been channeling energy, sending it to me right on the line. Oh yeah, you know you're fine, and somehow you find the time to wine and dine. Your bitch is better than me. Ooh, this shit is trash, but I'ma give it right on back, 'cause that's what I've been getting from you. Yeah, lady. You've been out on the block acting crazy, doing your thing, and then you turn around and blame it on the moon. Just 'cause you're feeling blue. How much can a heart take when feelings change like phases of the moon? Ooh, you found me in a hard space. Hey, hey, hey. Say it done. No pain, no pleasure. Can't lie, took it off. Oh, you take my money and I don't get it back. Oh, no patience. I'm running out, honey. Oh, yeah. Oh, this shit is trash. I'ma give it right on back, 'cause that's what I've been getting from you. Yeah, lately. Oh, yeah, yeah. You and I ain't mind, shedding lies, loving me blind. Talk about we should take time, how you go and call it good news. Oh, 'cause you feel it, yeah. How much can I take? The feelings change like phases of found it in that hard space. I'm trying to let new energy. I don't wanna hurt you.
How y'all feeling?
Don't wanna let you leave.
How y'all feeling, yo? What's going on?
Well, you are purple. Do you know that?
Yeah. Got the purple lights on.
Yeah, you're a whole mood.
That's going on.
You're giving flying purple people eater.
So stupid. I'm out here. I'm purple. We're trying to brighten this up on my joint. Okay, there we go. So how y'all feeling? Hello. I'm gonna need y'all to be lively, okay? I'm gonna need y'all to be lively today. We going over the model some more. Come on, y'all. Where's the enthusiasm? Come on with it. Caitlin, you in the car?
Yes, I am in the car. Actually, I'm on the way to Dallas, but I'm listening. I promise.
All right. Be careful. Be careful. Is it still snow on the ground?
Ice, yes, it is.
Yeah, be very careful. Okay.
Yeah, but I'm here.
Okay. John Jay, how you doing, y'all?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm doing good. I seen you somewhere with one of my friends. I think it was maybe Ashley. I can't remember who it was.
Cooper?
Is that her last name?
At the game?
Yeah.
Wizards game?
Yes.
Why
Yeah.
did you text me?
He said, "Why didn't who text you?"
You said you saw me at the game?
No, she posted it online. I wasn't at the game. I don't.
Oh, okay. I'm like, what? You were in the building and didn't say nothing?
Nah. She posted it, and I was like, "Oh my gosh, small world."
Too small.
Very small for sure. Oh man. All right, let's see. All right, we're gonna get into the model. I also have a guest speaker today. I think y'all are gonna enjoy her. So yeah, I'm pretty hyped. Let me pull up my slides real quick because I need to check what y'all know. Give me 1 second. Let me text Natasha. She really wanted to know this stuff. Let me make sure she's joined. All right. Let me pull up my little slideshow. One second. There we go. Oops. Second. Open this. There we go. And I'm having some technical difficulties today. Why is it not popping up? One more time. Oh, there we go. Okay. Here we go. All right, we're gonna do these terms one more time because I need y'all to get this stuff. I need y'all to understand this stuff. I know it seems redundant. I know it seems like a lot, but this is so important. And as you get to start raising capital for your own projects, these terms are gonna come up, and you need to know them. There's a few new ones on here, but some of these are old. I'm gonna start asking, and if you know, just tell me what you believe the answer to be. What is the GP? What's the GP? You got a GP and an LP. What is a GP?
General partner who pretty much takes on the responsibility, the risk, the liability, and then your limited partner is the one typically investing in what the GP project ordeal is without the risk.
Okay. All right. That's correct. That's correct. I got a curveball. What's a co-GP?
So I know they have a lot more responsibility than an LP, almost like a co-partner or a co-lead.
Right.
But they have like almost like it's majority share, if that makes sense.
Yep. Yep. And we'll come back to that a little bit later. We'll come back to what
Okay.
a co-GP is, what that looks like, what you might hear from a potential investor. We'll cover that. What is NOI? What is that acronym? What is NOI? Anybody except for Sky. I need somebody except for Sky, because I know Sky knows this. Somebody, John Jay, what is NOI?
Net operating income.
There it is. There it is. There it is. All right. So there's a few new terms on here. What is a preferred return? What is a preferred return? Sky, you can join this one if you feel so inclined. Preferred return. What is that?
The return that the LP gets before any other distributions or before the GP gets anything.
Exactly. Exactly. Did everybody understand what that is?
Yes.
Okay.
Can you repeat that? I'm sorry.
I mean, can you repeat that?
Yeah, so the LP is making the investment and GP is running the project, but the LP wants, something for their money because they're not getting the extra like acquisition fee and asset fee and development fee that the GP is. So the way it's structured is the limited partner always gets a certain like 7%, 10% of any profits from the project first. And then let's say the project makes 20%. So then the first 10% goes to the limited partner, and then the remaining 10% is divided between the GP and the LP based on a formula that was agreed for the project. But the preferred return is that first 10%. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
I had a quick question. Now, are all deals structured with a preferred return, or if you're an LP, is that language you should be looking for? If I'm like looking to like be an LP of a project.
Definitely. I have not seen a deal that didn't include a pref. And not to say that it doesn't exist, but typically, so Hamang hit something right on the head. We talked last week about the money that you're going to pay yourself in a deal, right? How are you going to get paid? A development fee, an acquisition fee. We talked about all the fees. So that's how you get paid. But what about the LP, the person who's investing the capital? What are you also giving them that secures their position in the investment? That's where a preferred return comes in, also called a pref. So as an LP investor, that's what they'll ask you. What's the pref? What's the pref? Are you giving a 7% preferred return, which means that they get preferential treatment? So before anybody else gets paid, they get paid 7%, 8%, 9%, 10%. Right? So this is very important. Very, very important. Now, let me ask, what is the waterfall? You'll hear people say, do you have your waterfall set up? What is a waterfall? Can anybody explain it in theory, what that means? And there are no wrong answers. Just throw something out. What you think? What is a waterfall?
It's the percent of return over time, and like it increases based on the NOI. So like, look at, is it NOI? Is that what it's based on, or based on?
Yeah, no, yeah, you're right. You're right.
Okay.
Yeah, you're right.
So the preferred return could be like 10% up to a certain number, and then say you really, really surpass like your profitability for that quarter. And then actually I don't know how to describe it, but I know it's like it could be like 10%, and then it's like 10 to 15%, and then like 15% or more, they get percent of whatever the excess revenue profit is from that quarter or that year.
Exactly. So you're about 80% correct.
Okay.
The only thing that you said that is incorrect, the pref is separate from the waterfall. So that preferred return, that gets paid regardless. So if you have a 10% preferred return, that gets paid out regardless. And then the best way to think about a waterfall is just like that. What does a waterfall do? Come on, TLC, don't go chasing them. What does a waterfall do? What is it? What is a waterfall? The actual literal waterfall. What does it do?
The water falling over, like sometimes there's like steps along the way.
Yep.
How much water is flowing through?
Right. How much water? In this scenario, we're not talking about literal water. What are we talking about?
How much return and money is flowing through over the
money.
year?
Okay.
And is it based on quarter or yearly, or like what's the standard that an investor would want to see?
So how are you paying back your investors? Are you doing it on a quarterly level? Are you doing it on an annual level? That's a matter of preference, right?
Is there isn't like a standard in the industry?
No, I've seen it annually. I've seen it quarterly.
Okay.
Yeah, I've never really seen a monthly. I've heard of it. I've personally never seen it done that way.
Okay.
I think because it's too much paperwork that has to get done, that it's just easier to do it on a quarterly basis.
Yeah.
But you could, if you wanted to do it monthly, shoot, if you wanted to do it daily, you could. I wouldn't suggest it. But quarterly, I definitely have seen that more often than not. And then some do an annual return.
Some will also not have a return for the first 2 years or first 3 years until you start making a profit.
Oh yeah. Do we have a cliff? Like we wait till we're stabilized or anything?
You could, for sure.
Put that in the terms.
There are some levels where you won't even hit your pref. Right? Like those first couple of years, you might not hit your pref. You might just make enough to keep the lights on. Right? In which that pref could accrue. Okay? In which that pref could accrue. Now let's think about that real quick. If you got $5 million from investors and you're paying a 10% pref, what are investors getting every single year regardless? You got $5 million, you're paying a 10% pref. What are investors getting on their money?
500,000?
Say it one more time.
500,000?
500,000. 500,000.
Can you say that again?
So let's say you raised $5 million from investors.
Okay.
you're promising them a 10%, I'm sorry, you're promising them a 10% pref on
Okay.
the money that they gave, right? Then what is that dollar amount year after year? What are you paying your investor back?
Oh, not until we hit $500,000 in profit in NOI.
Right. So what happens if
So do they gain interest?
it accrues? Exactly. So let's
That's right.
I'll give you the example. That first year, you only have 250,000 to pay back investors,
Mm-hmm.
which means that you pay them back that 250, but you owe them 5 because that's what you promised them.
Mm-hmm.
Right? You promised them 10%. So you owe them another 5. I mean, you owe them another 250. What happens the next year is that 500 turns into 750.
Damn.
Right?
So you got to pay your investors. So you got to make sure you're making enough, like income, if you will, to make sure you can pay your investors back. That's what it sounds like.
At least the pref. That's what you will want. And so that's where it becomes really important for you to understand what can you actually do, right?
Yeah.
Is 10% too high? Is 7% better? Right? And then if you get into the 7% range, interest rates are 7%. So if I'm an investor, I would do better with my money in the bank.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I'm saying? So these are all things to consider, to understand, to know. When interest rates are at 4%, 5%, okay, your 7% looks a little bit more promising. Right? All right. All right. And then the last one on this, what is the hurdle? What is a hurdle? Anybody know what a hurdle is?
I mean, something you have to overcome, but
That
this
is a,
hurdle right now, which I have to overcome.
that is a fact. A hurdle is something that you have to overcome. I wouldn't disagree at all. So when you're talking about a hurdle as it relates to this, what is the next threshold, right? So you have your pref, it's 5, it's 7%, 8%, 9%,
Oh, yeah.
right? Then after you've paid your pref, the rest of the money hits a hurdle. So once you get 10% past your pref, you might say to investors, okay, after that, we split it 80-20, right? So if we made 20% more, if the pref was 500,000 and we made $1 million this year, okay, you get your 500,000 plus everything after that 500,000 up to 10%, we split 80-20. Right? So when it hits that hurdle, boom. If we do a 20% IRR, it hits another hurdle. So if we get up to 20% of a rate of return, then that money, we may say, hey, we're splitting this 60-40. You get 60% of that, we get 40% of the rest. It's all going to make sense. I know this might not make sense now, but when we look at the model,
The LPs always get the larger percentage.
the LPs usually get the larger percentage. You will get to a point where it will be 50-50,
Okay.
right? And then you could do it in a way, because this is the thing. Your investors, let's consider the scenario that I gave you. Your investors gave you $5 million, right?
Yeah.
So even if you gave me $500,000, you're gonna have to do that every year for 10 years just for me to get my money back. Just to be at net zero.
Mhm.
If you only paid out the pref for a decade, okay, I'm made whole. And not really because of inflation, so I actually lost some money. Right? So the goal is to get investors paid back their original principal as quickly as possible. I want to get you to your 5 million ASAP. You know why? Because I can tell an investor straight to their face, I was able to pay you back all the money that you invested thus far. Now we're splitting everything 50-50. Right?
Interesting. Okay.
All right, let me stop this share. Glad y'all understanding. We getting into the waterfalls. We getting into the don't go chasing the waterfalls. Stick to the rivers and the lakes that you're used to. That might be too old for some of y'all, man. I might have went up your heads. That's crazy.
Cut it out. Cut it out. Cut it out.
All right, let me share my screen. We're gonna get into this a little bit deeper. Disregard all my tabs, y'all. Don't be looking at my tabs. I got mad tabs open. Can y'all see my screen?
Yes.
I'm gonna need y'all to be talking, okay? It's late. I'm tired. I just ate. You know what I'm saying? I got itis. I need y'all to be a little more lively today. All right, so let's walk through this. If you have your model, please open it up. Go to your waterfall tab. Let's try and make sense of this. I did record. Yes, I did record. So did I record? I'm pretty sure I did. Yeah, I did. All right, so this is being recorded. It'll be shared, especially for you, Kaylin, since you're in the car. But let's figure out what's going on here. You see where it says sponsor equity, B7, sponsor equity. What is sponsor equity?
The money we put in.
All right. If you are the sponsor, then yes, that is the money that you put in. I have something in here called co-GP equity. What do you believe co-GP equity? Oh, just talk about what is a co-GP?
Co-founder?
I was gonna say like a co-founder.
Co-general partner.
Yeah.
Yep. So I'll give you an example of something that could happen to any one of you. You have a project. You're pitching said project. Global Lofts in Louisville. Infinity Land in Costa Rica. You're pitching this project to investors. Investors say to you, you know what? I like this project. I want to be your co-GP. Right?
Like
I want to be your co-GP. I want to be your co-general partner. And I'm going to bring money to the table. I'm bringing money to the table, and I want to be your co-general partner. Happens more often than you think, okay? Even some funds require that they are actually on the GP side. So they'll be like, hey, is there an ability to co-GP? If anyone ever says that, they must be bringing money to the table, okay? Capital has to be brought to the table. So that's almost like a side note. If anyone says, hey, we can co-GP this deal, that comes with a price. That is what is reflected in that 600,000. I'm assuming that someone has said, hey, we will co-GP this deal with you. and we're bringing 600,000 to the table. And you're like, cool. I'm raising about 5 something. I need that 6. Like, that's perfect. Come on in, right? And you're splitting that 20% basically amongst the two of you. You bringing your capital to the table. The co-GP is bringing their capital to the table. Where are you getting your money from, y'all? Where are you getting your money from?
It's built into my model.
Shoo, how is it built into your model? Tell me, please tell me.
Let's see, development fees and acquisition.
There it is. There it is, yo. That's your sponsor equity built into the model. All right, so we talked about the preferred return. Can anyone tell me, because I think yours are all the same, what is the preferred return on this model? What's the percentage? What's the percentage? Come on, ain't no wrong answers. Go ahead. What's the percentage that I put into the model for the preferred?
Is it the 10%?
Ooh, how you do that in the car? You better, you know what? You better be being safe, yo. Be safe.
I'm riding. I'm not driving. I'm on the passenger side.
Okay, okay, all right. I was about to say 10%. 10%. Right?
Well, I see it now. Yeah.
Each now?
Under hurdle.
Yep.
Mhm.
10% right there. All right, 10% of what? Of the LP equity. Right? 10% of the LP equity. What is 10% of 4,229,600? What's 10% of that?
422,960.
Oh, okay, all right, passenger. I see you. I see you. I see you. You see it right there? Do you see it right there? Do you understand what's going on? Boom, 10%. But guess what? Guess what's interesting about that 10%? What's not happening? What's
It's not accruing.
You
right?
said
It's not accruing, like it's not accruing any interest.
what's not happening is that's not putting a dent into what you owe.
Okay.
It's not putting a dent into what you owe. And I built it that way specifically. You're promising them that 10%, and that doesn't go against their principal. Does that make sense? That is what they are given as as being an investor in the deal. They don't start to get their money taken down until later.
Isn't that usually on the exit, like the return of capital, or is there a scenario where you kind of start returning it along the way as well?
You just start returning it along the way.
Okay.
If you're making enough money along the way to return it, yeah, like you start returning it along the way. Okay. What honestly ends up happening, the big bulk of it gets taken out when you refi the project.
Right.
Can anyone tell me when the refi happens on this model?
Is that when we're stabilized?
And what year will that be?
2027.
Woo! And look at what's happening, y'all. Okay, that's how much we made year one. This is how much we made. It's steadily going up, right? This is how much we made year two. This is the net cash available for distribution. This is what we can distribute to investors. This is where we are year three. Oh my gosh, we eclipsed 2 million in year four. Look at that right there. Look at that right there. $16 million. $16 million. Your investors only gave you $4 million. Right? How are we calculating? Let me ask a question. How would you even calculate how much money you could get on your refinance? How would you determine what the value of your property is? Oh, this is a good question right here. How would you know? What helps you to determine the value?
Well, the NOI and then the cap rate, and then that gets you the value of the property.
There it is. There it is, the NOI and then the cap rate. What's the cap rate when you go to refi? Is it 8%? You selling at a 10 cap? You selling at a 12 cap? What's your cap rate? Determining the value based off of the NOI, right? And there's even a sensitivity analysis that shows at any given point, right? So if the cap rate goes up, this is where you're going to be at. You take out 50%. Let's say when you decide to refi, your refinancing cap rate is 8%, 8 cap, and you decide to take out half of that.
Can you explain cap rate again?
Thanks. So I was like, I don't think I know what cap rate is.
Yeah, the cap rate is the capitalization rate. So I guess the easiest way to explain it, let me think of it is the rate in which you are able to capitalize off of a piece of property. Best way to explain it. If you have a piece of real estate and from said operating business of that real estate, you make $100,000 every year. It makes you $100,000. And the going capitalization rate in that area is 10%, a 10% capitalization rate. And your NOI every year is $100,000. Then what is the value of said real estate? Stick with me now, stick with me.
Is it a million?
It's $1 million. Did you say $1 million?
Yeah,
Yes, indeed.
the million. But
Yeah.
think of it like, I mean, isn't that the concept behind like gentrification and like property in the market? Like how I thought of cap was like literally like when you purchase your property, it had this value almost like a house, and then 10 years from now, it's gonna be this valuable.
Kind of. This is all based off of NOI, however.
So maybe I'm thinking of it from, maybe that's residential I'm thinking of it as, but
Yeah.
it's like, but to me it's like similar, like the price sheet based on like how you perform and what's going on to go up.
Right. Right.
Okay.
And so you'll see certain markets where the capitalization rate in that market is like 5%, right? Like San Francisco. I wouldn't be surprised if you saw 4% capitalization rate. Right. And so the values, because they're making $100,000, like the values are exponentially higher. Right. But in some of the smaller markets, 10%, 8% is aggressive. Does that make sense? Does everybody understand how you would even get the cap rate? Do I need to spend a little bit more time there? Because I will.
I'm sorry. I do feel like I need it repeated.
Okay. All right. So let me do it by way.
If you said the sentence, capitalization rate is blank. like, how do I finish that sentence?
Okay. So I'm trying to do it in a way that's not super confusing. So you calculate it by dividing the net in operating income, so the NOI, this is the backwards way to get the cap rate. NOI by the value. Okay? Give you an example. You're buying a hotel. We're gonna do this real time. You saw a hotel online. It is selling for $5 million. It's selling for $5 million. They sent you also the financials in the due diligence folder, right? Sent you the financials. They show that they're making a profit of about $400,000. What is the cap rate? Again, divide the property's net operating income by the value. What's that cap rate?
8%.
Yep. Now, what if you found out that in this area that you're buying this property, most of the properties in that area are selling at a 6 cap? Are you getting a deal?
No.
You're buying at an 8 cap. Properties are usually selling at a 6 cap.
You are getting a deal because that means that you're capitalizing at 2% more than what's the normal.
Gotcha.
Which probably translates to just like buying at a lower cost rate, right?
Yep. Yep. Christina, you with me still?
Yeah, I was typing, so I heard y'all talking about the percentage and like, is it that you want your percentage to be higher or lower? You want your percent, yeah.
It really depends on the market.
Okay.
Right? I wouldn't say that you would want it either, lower or higher. I just know based off of you would need to determine what is the cap rate, the typical cap rate in your area.
Okay.
What are properties selling for in your area? Is it 10%? Is it 8%? So now when I'm looking at a project or I'm looking to purchase something, I'm like, okay, this is an actual deal. I'm getting it at a 10 cap. I'm looking at online. I'm seeing other properties selling for, 6, 5.
So the scenario you just gave was if the other properties are selling at a 6% cap rate, but you got yours for 8%, you were like, which one is the best value?
Right. Which one is the best value? If you're making the same amount and you're and the other property is selling at 6 cap, that's a better, you're getting a deal. You're getting a deal if you're getting it at 8. I'll give you an example.
So in that scenario, the higher cap rate is a better deal for you.
For the buyer.
For the buyer.
For the seller, it's the worst deal. For the buyer, it's a better deal. Right?
I'll give you an example. Let's take a look. Go to your key financials page. On the key financials page, I'm gonna zoom in on it right here. I know we don't have that much more time, man. I feel like I can sit here and talk about this stuff all day. If you were to refinance at a 12 cap, what is your property valued at? Right? According to my pro forma, if I'm gonna sell or refinance my property at a 12 cap, what is the value?
29, it's small, but I see 29 million. Oh Lord, I need stronger glasses. Looks like the last numbers are threes, but yeah. Sorry,
Yeah.
I'm just looking at your blown up version versus because I got too many windows up. Yeah, 29 million 388,330.
Exactly. That's at 12%. That's a 12% cap rate. That's how much my property is worth. If I were to refi at an 8 cap, how much more money is my property worth? How much more than a 12 is it at an 8? What's the value?
$44 million something. So it's about roughly, 15 million
15 more million. 15 more million is the difference between refinancing at a 12 cap and refinancing at an 8 cap. And you need to determine what is the cap rate in your area. In your specific city and your locale, when you look at other deals, what are they selling for?
I have a question. It might sound stupid. Why is it to calculate the cap rate? Why is it your NOI divided by the value rather than your NOI and the value subtracted from it?
So the cap rate is kind of like, okay, if you bought the property like a $5 million, it's like you bought it cash, right? Let's say you bought it cash for 5 million and the property gave you 500,000 in NOI every year, right? It's like putting in a deposit. Like if you put $5 million in a deposit and that deposit gave you like 500,000 every year, then your return, your interest rate on that deposit is like 10%. Right? So it's like the same way. Cap rate is like on how much money is being invested and then how much money does that investment generate, right? So if you invest 5 million and you get 500,000, you're making 10%. So that's the way you calculate it.
Okay, I was thinking of, I guess, like later in when you're making, like where we were seeing like you could make 16 million earlier in that 1 year. And like, why wouldn't it just be subtracted from the 4 million that you put in? But that makes sense.
Yeah, and really to go back on something that Hemang said, it's a little bit different actually, because let's go back to that same scenario. You put 500,000 into a bank and you're accruing 8% on said money. How much are you getting back?
$40,000?
Yeah, you're getting 400,000.
8% on 500 or 8% on 5 million?
I'm sorry. Yeah, I'm sorry. Did I say 500? I meant 5. I meant
yeah. 8% on 5 million would be 400. Yeah.
Yeah. Which means that is actually lower. So this is calculating the value based off of, how much this property generates. You also know how much it's selling for. You know these two things, and you're able to calculate the capitalization rate that this property is being sold at. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that makes sense.
And this sensitivity analysis will kind of help you to figure that out, right? Because what has not changed regardless? Like these numbers are changing. What hasn't changed? What is constant throughout this entire process? How much money you made. Your NOI, that didn't change. Your NOI on the year that I decided to refinance, it stays the same. What changes is at what percentage, what cap rate percentage is the bank gonna give me my loan at? Because that's gonna be huge. If you see right here, that's the difference between, that's a $15 million swing. So if they're saying, okay, we'll refinance you at an 8 cap, you like, oh yeah, it's lit. Because remember, your investors only gave you $5 million. Right? So even if you decided that you didn't even want to take all the money out, you're just going to take half of it out. You're going to refi and take half the money, 50% loan to value when you refinance your property. Now you have $22 million. Easily pay back your investors, and then we start to go into the waterfall. Yeah, absolutely. And I know we have a guest speaker coming in at 9 o'clock. So we've got our preferred return showing. We got the 10% on the preferred return, right? And then we have our return as being accrued if we can't hit it. So you got the distributions, the return to capital, catching up. Then we've got, if you get above 10%, up to 15% IRR, then this is what the split is going to look like. Right? We did basically 70-30. You get up to 10%, in between 10% and 15, all the way up to 15, we're splitting it basically 70-30. You're going to get 70, we going to get 30. Right? Now, what happens if you pass that? All right, we at 60-40. We don't do that in year one. We do that in year two. Boom. All right, what if we even do better than that? We flipped it on them. We said, if we crush it, if we kill it, if we do better than 20% at any given point, oh, we flipping that. LPs are getting 40%, we getting 60.
I don't like that. I need like, I don't know, more than that. No, but that sounds good.
But look at what happens here, right? And this is obviously considering that there's a refi that's taking place. What's happening here? And are you seeing what's taking place? When you're really crushing it, it's flowing through. Everything is flowing through. This is how much money you have left over. These are remaining funds. So you already hit this hurdle. You hit the 15 to 20% hurdle. You still got money left over, y'all. You go on down. This is that money that's left over getting split. Look at how it's getting split. LP is only getting 40% of that. I'm getting 60. Look at what happens when you refi. Obviously, we definitely gonna get 20% IRR on the refi. Look at what's happening. They getting back 6 million. Guess who's getting back 9? Is it making sense? You sure? Y'all got questions? Are you with me?
I got lots of questions, but I'm gonna do your 101.
I know I'm throwing a lot at you, but this is the detail. This is the most important, as far as like pitching a deal, these are the things that you want to look out for. The hurdle. You hit a certain threshold, you're gonna get paid this much, sponsor gets paid this much. I'm sorry, LP investor gets paid this much. You as a sponsor, you get your cut, they get their cut. Let me let Britt in real quick. What's up, Britt? You're on
I
mute.
just opened up to
We're going over the
my
waterfall.
nightmare.
Yeah. We are going over the waterfall. I see some people scratching their heads. I see some folks that's over here confused. I'm trying to get them to understand.
That's because waterfalls are one of the most challenging concepts to understand, even for like seasoned people. And you actually are, this makes sense here. And for me to say that, that's saying something. Hi, everyone.
Thank you, Britt, for joining.
Of course.
We're gonna give you the floor in just a second. I just want to make sure before we do that everybody understands what has been happening. Are you with me? You still with me, y'all?
Yeah, I'm good. This is good.
Okay.
It's looking like I'm gonna have to book some office hours.
Yeah. Yeah.
For sure. This is not easy what we're going over. Right? It is hard. I just need you to understand the concept. So if you understand the concept, over time, this will all start to make sense, right? So you're returning capital to your investors. You have promised them a pref. In your deck, in your pitch deck, you said we are giving you a 10% preferred return, right? Easiest way to think about it, investor gave you $5 million, you're giving them, for the life of the deal, as long as they're in it, 10% on the money that they gave you, right? 10% of 5 million, 500,000. You see that reflected here. They're getting their pref.
Mm-hmm.
That does nothing to the money that they gave, right? That is just the preferred return on their investment. Like, it's better for them to put their money with you. Their money will do better than it does at a bank because they gave it to you. You're giving them 10%. The bank is going to give them 7%. But it gets even better because you're saying to them as well, once we get to 10%, after that, you're getting 100% of that. Or you could say we could do an 80-20. 80-20. What is the goal? What is the goal? What are you trying to do?
Pay back the investor as soon as possible.
Soon as possible. I'm trying to get you out of my hair as soon as possible. As soon as we equal, where I didn't give you all your money back, now we good. We're good. Because I could say at that point, now everything is 50-50. I gave you your money back. You already getting 10% still, right? Even after you get your money back, you're still getting that 10% on your initial investment. Sky, you hearing this? Because this is important for LP. You are.
Oh, I'm knowing.
Yeah,
I'm knowing.
For the life. You're getting that 10% regardless. You're gonna get it even once I get my money back.
Like you say, get me out your hair as quick as possible.
Yeah. And then the different hurdles, the rate of return. So if you're making enough to hit over 10% rate of return, you make the splits however you want it. We're gonna do 60, 70, 30, 60, 40. You determine what that looks like. But I just want you to understand the principle around the concept of a waterfall and what it means. So when you see it, when you hear it, you're not just totally confused. The money is flowing like a waterfall. Just imagine you got like 5 steps and
Yeah.
you got a leak in the house, and the water is just flowing through them steps. Some of it ain't going down, some of it is going down, some of it's getting caught, some of it's going through the wood panels. You know what I'm saying? That's basically it. And so as long as you understand the principle, then when you come to my office hours, we got something to work with. You know what I'm saying? So you just need to understand the principle of how it works, what it means to refi, what it means to exit. So two of the biggest places to return capital is on refi. And I ain't even talk about exit. We ain't even talk about the exit. And the last thing I'm gonna ask really quick. So we see that this is the revenue, right? This is the available cash for the distribution. This is the NOI. After you paid all your bills, this is what you're making year over year. What happens here? Why does it go back down? You made $2 million in 2026. You refied in 2027. And now look what happened in 2028. Why did it go back? You almost back to where you started. Why is that so low?
Because you refinance?
You have higher debt service. The NOI goes down again.
Exactly. Does that make sense, everybody? Real quick before Britt starts.
Say it again.
Yeah, say it one more time.
You have higher
Like a bigger, you have a bigger mortgage or a bigger loan once you refinance.
So let's go. Yep. Let's go back to right here. You took out more money, right? Let's think of it as a single family home. You bought your house for $250,000. You got some equity in your house now, right? You bought it 5 years ago. You got some equity in your house. Other houses are selling for about $1 million now. It's crazy. But you're not trying to move. You just want to take some money out, right? So you bought your house for $250,000. Let's say, you've only been living there for 5 years. You still owe about 200 on it, but it's worth $1 million now, right? So initially your mortgage was about, $3,000 a month, let's just say, give or take. Now you're going to take equity out of your property. You decide you're going to take $250 out of the property of equity. You're going to get a HELOC, a home equity line of credit, or a home equity loan, or whatever, taking that money out. Your mortgage is not $3,000 no more, yo. Your mortgage, you paying a mortgage like you got a $500,000 mortgage, give or take, right? So now it's went from 3,000 to 6,000. That's why that number is lower. You took out, when you refied, you took out money to pay back your investors. You're not going to have as much left over as you did before. Because your mortgage.
Now I see why everybody sells, because that sounds horrible.
It does sound.
Now I see why everyone exit.
Right, it does sound horrible, but then you determine, okay, by the time you get back to, a couple years from now, you back up.
Well, I was gonna say, by the time you get back to a couple years, you have jumped.
Yeah.
Right? So the money that the refining that you're doing, you're having a little dip, but there's a significant, like, exponential growth in what you can do.
Yep.
Right?
Yep. And then that exit just looks really sweet.
That's your 24?
That's my yeah.
I know why. But that's when you want to exit?
That's a 10-year exit, yep.
That's pretty good. Sorry. Never stop learning. Especially this stuff.
Stuff is challenging. But thank you, Bray. I appreciate you coming. I wanted to interview you because you're doing amazing things. I saw your interview that just came out about your project in Jacksonville. So please introduce yourself. Tell us what you're working on, where it's at, what you're doing. Just tell us what you're doing.
Hi, everyone. My name is Britt Morgan Sachs. I'm the founder of The June. The June is a new private members club concept that I've been developing for about 2 years after moving from New York. I'm a lifelong New Yorker, to Jacksonville, Florida about 2.5 years ago as a COVID move. But quickly, discovered how much I love it here. I built an incredible community. I had experience developing members club. I sort of learned that market in 2017 to 19 when I worked for Howard Hughes Corporation, which is a public real estate company. I was recruited to develop a concept in the South Street Seaport development. And so when I got here to Jax, I realized pretty quickly that there was an opportunity for a more sort of like modern, inclusive, sort of social experience here. Here they have the very traditional golf and country clubs and beach clubs, and they're super stodgy and outmoded, and they really don't address, I think, a couple of addressable markets. One are people like me who are moving from, major cities to places like Jacksonville, Tampa, like tons of cities throughout the US. And then people that are already here, who are, I think, pretty culturally like underserved. So there's sort of like a dearth of great hospitality where I currently am, but there's, significant disposable income and sort of like a desire for these, the cultural infrastructure, as it were. So it's like, well, people know already what it is to spend on a third space. They have the means to do it, and they're spending tens of thousands of dollars a year, $100,000 a year on it. They're all like stodgy and old and boring. And then the margins in, sort of, I call them emerging gateway cities, not second cities or third cities, because we don't like that since we live here. There is the opportunity to actually make money and to own the core asset is so much better. So one of the great learnings that I got from working at Howard Hughes, I developed this project for 2 years from the ground up. Got a little bit of a healthy education in real estate and hospitality development. But my project, the concept never ended up opening because, and I did dodge a bullet. Like if we had done it now, it would have been COVID. It was sort of a blessing, but it kept getting more and more and more and more expensive. And it ended up becoming like a $30 million project. And, that's a developer that actually owned the property. But, and as I kept seeing more and more of these clubs popping up, and I should just does everybody know what a private members club is? Are you familiar with Soho House and sort of all of these? Okay. So like, it's a fortune to do this, to do it in LA, to do it in Miami. You need, millions, tens of millions of dollars. When I got here, I was like, oh, wow, I could actually buy a building for $1 million and own it, right? I could actually like build this out. So for what I'm doing now, and I'll get to that in 1 second, I think my project will cost $7 million as opposed to $30 million project somewhere else. But the market is here, the demand is here, and I actually have not only the opportunity to make significant money in this market, but also have an impact, right? And sort of leave a mark. So when I went through all of that, I'm like, oh, well, this is sort of a no-brainer. So I've spent, like 2 years. This is my third location. I had one that I was working on for a year, another one that I was working on for a year. I think Damon and I met, when? A year and change ago? I mean, I feel like I've known Damon now for
a long time.
My whole life. I don't know, poor guy. I mean, but I think we met last April, and he's completely changed. I just want to tell you, completely changed my life. And I would not be here, and I say that unequivocally, would not be where I am about to sign my LOI on my first location, with money ready to be like people ready to write the checks and sort of soft commitments, and being interviewed on podcasts thanks to Damon, like it without him. And so I just want to pause for a second and just say, you all are in like such good company. You couldn't have a better teacher. And I'm furiously taking notes like on everything that he's saying, because I learn from him every single day. So this is like so wonderful. So congrats to you for being part of this experience with him. But sorry, I'm saying a lot of things, but I am, I'm just on my LOI. Yeah.
I'm gonna cash app you for that.
Yeah, sorry.
I appreciate you you playing me like that.
It's just the truth. I mean, it's just the truth. And I these are really, really, really tricky concepts, first of all. And I don't think they've been explained to me as sort of as no one's been a better teacher and as clear and made me feel not stupid to ask questions, right? That I didn't know. And this industry is all about not only who you know, but like what you know. And it's all very gated information, right? And so thank you, Damon, for creating like a forum for this, an opportunity to learn and to ask questions. And, I think quite frankly, when I was at Howard Hughes and I had the opportunity to learn some of this stuff, like I was actually really, intimidated to ask the questions. I was certainly the only person who looked like me in a room of all white, men developers. And I was sort of expected to know, I was like, what's CapEx? Like, what's CAPEX? I was like, oh, CapEx. But I would have no reason to know. And I've often in my career, like done things that I'd never done before, like throughout my career. And it was really the first time that I was sort of like afraid to ask questions. So I'm so glad that you have this, this here. I mean, and waterfalls, by the way, are really, really difficult.
Yes, they are.
And it's not, I mean, it takes a while to actually get it. So I'm still learning. I was like playing with spreadsheets the first time. And I think I was actually talking to you. I was like, what is this waterfall thing I have to learn? But so anyway, sorry, I'm running enough, but
I appreciate all of it.
All this to say, you're getting an incredible education, and it's a wonderful investment in what you're doing. And if I had done this, I'd probably be much further along. I wish you had done this a year ago, Damon. I'd be much further along. But so I am, I'm just about to sign my LOI. I think
tell us let's touch on that, because you're signing an LOI. Explain the deal in itself, because it's a little bit different, right? Like
what I'm doing.
Yeah.
Okay. So my vision for this, it's called the June, by the way, because I decided to move to Jacksonville in June. So the overarching vision for this in terms of the business is that it is a operating business. It has a brand. There's the June will exist in many cities, right? So the bigger sort of strategic play is that I create a network of, premier clubs, hotel, hospitality experience throughout the Southeast, Midwest, and in these sort of emerging cities, right? Now, my goal is to own the property, if that makes sense, because it doesn't necessarily make sense for every deal, as I have learned, right? Ideally, I'd like to own everyone, but I guess it also depends on the city, right? So here in Jacksonville, there were 2 locations that I was looking at initially. And I was very blinders on, I'm only going to own this. I only want to do a deal or do a property that I can own. What ended up happening was the terms of the deal for the first one made no sense. Yeah, we can do it, but we want 50% of your company. I was like, no, because I have to go raise however many millions of dollars, and I've already given away all my equity, right? And also that just wouldn't work. The second one was just, and this happens. And I will just say, this happens, right? You'll find a location, you'll put so much into it, blood, sweat, tears, money, whatever it is, and it will fall through. And that's just it just happens. So I think part of this experience for me has been, it's wonderful to fall in love with a location, but it doesn't necessarily have to be in that place. And if the deal is not right, do not do it, because you're setting yourself up and your business up for failure, right? So I think that was probably the second thing that I learned. And I remember actually calling Damon. I was like, the first one had fallen through. They wanted my whole company. The second one, the owner just kept flaking. And I remember I called Damon. I was like, I just wasted 2 years of my life and a lot of money, and I have nothing to show for it. Nothing's going to happen. He's like, don't worry. Don't do a bad deal. Don't do a bad deal. I'm like, okay. The next day, this location became available, and I am working with really fantastic developers. It's a 20,000 square foot former bank building in downtown Jacksonville. And downtown Jacksonville is really interesting because it's right on the precipice of this like incredible revitalization. There's this developer also has a fund. They're raising like $1 billion, $500 million. They're buying up, everything down there. They're putting in new residential. Like it's going to be pretty remarkable. It's almost like, I think the closest comp is like Tampa. So there's like the water district, and that's become a whole thing. I think this is going to be the next one. And in fact, one of the developers who led that project is working with JWB is the name of the developer. So, I found a partner who understands the sort of intrinsic value of what I'm doing and what I'm bringing and how it's going to add value to their overall portfolio. So that's been great. So it's like the right partner, the right building, the right terms. But they can't sell the building. They can't sell the building because
The fund, right?
what's that?
Is it because it's in a fund? Like
It's in a fund. It's part of a fund. It's a little bit complex, but long story short is the city has carve outs from some of the things that they're buying because they don't want them to just like buy and flip it, right? And so they have to hold it. So what I've been able to negotiate, because still I'm like, well, my goal is to own. Maybe I can't own right now, but how can I own it down the line? So I was able to negotiate like a
right of first refusal.
A right of first refusal, but also to be able to buy into a percentage of the building at a discount and a valuation cap, right? So if I'm putting in, again, if I'm raising money, if I'm creating all the IP, if I'm doing all this stuff, how do I make sure that I'm also participating on the upside? Because I think that like one of the things that I've always experienced in my career is like, oh, I've brought so much value to other people. I've made a lot of people money based on my ideas, my relationships, my concepts. I'm like, no more, this is for me. So like, I have to stay true to that core principle for this is like, I need to own what I'm creating, right? So
real quick, Britt.
Yeah.
Can you explain to us what a valuation cap is?
I think so. Yeah, I mean, in this case, so there has to be like a ceiling, there has to be a cap, there has to be a ceiling on how much something is worth. Right. So in this case, I'm like, okay, the building today is worth $3 million. They bought it for $1 million. I say five. They bought it for $1 million. They've put $5 million into it. It will be, what's the word I'm looking for? I can't. When somebody goes and looks and determines the value of something. Appraised. Thank you.
Appraisal, yeah.
I also have 3 kids and I'm very tired. So please forgive me. I put everyone to bed. So if I'm rambling on, so there will be appraised. But there needs to be a ceiling, right, on how much it's worth when I can buy in, right? Because if it's worth $3 million today, and by virtue of the money that I'm raising to put into it, by virtue of the brand and the prestige that I bring to the neighborhood, and I'm creating value for that neighborhood, right? So I'm going to raise, rent values up. Everything that I'm doing is going to make the whole project more valuable. So let's say in 5 years, when they can sell the building, if I really wanted to, well, I don't want to be priced out because of all of my good work and good effort, right? So I'm like, all right, so the building's worth $3 million today. I'm putting in $7 million. When I come back in 5 years, it could be worth $20 million. If it's appraised at $20 million, right? So what I need them to agree to now is like, what is the maximum price that we can agree to today that I can that I can buy into? Is it $7 million? Is it $10 million? So that I can actually participate. Because if it's $20 million, I'm like, well, I can't do anything at that price. And I've created all the value. Did I explain? Is that clear? Okay. So yeah, what else can I tell you about the deal? I'm leasing this one, which for me at this time, and I would just say also like just a caveat, is like, don't necessarily get too sort of, enamored of one particular location, even though it's fine to fall in love, but be ready to walk away. I'd say also just be ready to pivot on your model if it makes sense, right? So I don't have a business that's generating any revenue right now, right? So when I went and like looked, I'm like, I would love to own it, but maybe it's better for me to own it on my second location when I have a first location that's making money. Because what I would be doing is just paying mortgage on something that like, it's going to take me 18 months to ramp up, right? So I'm like, maybe it's actually in my best interest just to pay rent right now until I'm making enough money where, okay, I can go and buy the next thing. And then I can maybe renegotiate my deal, whatever it is. You can always renegotiate or try to. So this first one's a lease. I got like a really good like base rent. Something that I spent a lot of time negotiating was TI. Have you talked about that yet?
No. So explain to us what TIs are.
The TI is tenant improvement, right? So the owner of the building will need to give you money towards like improving that building. That usually goes to like hard costs. So it's like your HVAC, they're meant to, there can be a laundry list of things that, and honestly, when I'm signed on this, I can share like my lease or parts of my lease, redacted a little bit, just so you can see what that looks like, if that's helpful, Damon.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But like I want to make sure that I don't know. There's a whole, like, think about all the things that you would need in a building for you to be sort of even just functional. So your landlord, the owner, should be giving you a chunk of money to make certain improvements on the building, right? They need to give you the building in a certain condition. Sometimes that's called white box, and the variations in what that means. But then they usually also give you another budget to make sort of additional improvements. Now, usually that's only applicable to things that are going to stay with the building, right? So it's not applicable necessarily to your soft costs, to your designer, to your architect. What I was able to negotiate was a pretty significant TI budget, so almost $1 million. But the win for me was that I'm able to apply it to my soft costs. Right? So like drapes, paint, like all the sort of decorative things, right? Hopefully to, my architect fees, just sort of an overall budget that stays with the building. So it's like, metal work and, all sort, like, I don't know. I'll give you a list. It's like a laundry list, but things that generally are not included in that, I'm like, well, if I don't own the building, then what am I, can I bring these beautiful door handles with me when I go? Like, right. I'm making these really beautiful sort of like, they're not necessarily capital improvements they're not necessarily going to improve or raise the sort of intrinsic value, like the hard value of the bricks, the building, but it's going to it's going to elevate the whole thing, thereby making your entire property more valuable, right? So again, because it's a good partner, they're like, okay, that feels fair. But I'm also giving them a pretty decent rent. So, God, what we should do is go over my LOI at some point when this is, we can go through, because it's really hard to know what to ask for if you haven't done it, right? There are also like, I had to give on a couple of things like, well, when does my TI disbursement when does my money get paid out? Does it get paid out as I go along? Does it get paid out when I'm done? Like, those are things that you have to think about. But then you also have to understand, like, well, how much money do I need to raise and how quickly do I think I'm going to be able to raise it?
Right.
So it's just figuring, yeah, just like how much is it going to cost? How quickly can I get it from wherever it needs to come from? And it's just a balancing act, right? It's a balancing act in a way. Am I describing this properly? I'm not as good a teacher. My mother is a brilliant teacher. I am terrible. So I hope that, and I sort of speak in a non-linear way. I hope this is making sense. But
Makes perfect sense to me. I'm right with you.
okay. Is anyone else understanding what I'm saying? Yes, sort of. Okay.
I'm curious, does anyone have any questions? Because the reason why I wanted you to come on, Britt, is because we've been talking about owning assets a lot.
Yeah.
And we really haven't touched on the possibility of leasing.
Mhm.
And maybe, and I know something that you said resonated with a couple people of like, do not fall in love with the property, because if it don't work, you got to pivot. You never know. It's just like you'll be working on 5 different assets and you might love this one. It just might not work.
It might not work. Yeah, I would say, yeah, and maybe we'll do a part 2 on like negotiating a lease, right?
Right.
Which I think actually could be helpful. But I would say, yeah, like that location, I mean, just don't fall in love easily, because if you have a vision for what it is that you want to do, unless it is so specific that it has to be in this one particular place, like the right location will find you, you will find it, but the deal has to make sense. Like, do not put yourself, and it's funny, my best friend who I grew up with comes from a very, very big like real estate dynasty, right? Like she's been doing this since she's been doing waterfalls since she's like 5 years old, and I'm not even kidding. And it's like I've been taught, like for real, and I've been talking to her. She's been a tough advisor, because she also doesn't understand that like when I go to negotiate, I'm not her negotiating. I'm not like some billionaire real estate scion negotiating. I'm me negotiating, right? But I will say, so I push back on her a lot. I'm like, I can't do that. I can't do that. She's like, listen, Britt, take what I say or leave it. But there's one thing I'm going to tell you. Do not start your deal where you are upside down. You are going to disadvantage yourself from the get-go if you fall in love with something and try to make a bad deal work. So that is just the biggest piece of advice I'd make. And quite honestly, I was right on the edge the other day, and Damon knows, because I called him about it. I call him about everything. And I was like, there's this one, I'm right there, but there's this one sticking point that like would really put me in a bad spot, like possibly like forever, right? If I did this. And you told me not to do it. And my friend was like, here's what you're going to tell these people. You're going to tell them like, I'm walking away. This is a deal breaker. I'm like, I can't do that. And she's like, no, you're going to tell them like, this is a deal breaker. I don't want to blow up the deal. And it would break my heart, but like, I'll go take this concept is bigger in the same way that your concept or your vision, this concept and my vision is bigger than this property. So I will find another one. I'll go to another city. I'll start from scratch, but it has to be the right deal. So I'm like, I'll walk away. This is a non-starter. And you know what happened? They were like, okay, no problem. I was like, no. They're like, oh yeah, don't worry about that part. Like this thing doesn't actually apply to her type of business. So it's all good. Tell her not to worry about it. Have a nice weekend. We're good to go. So don't be, I was like, yeah. So like, don't be afraid, right, to push back on things. And don't be like, you just have to be prepared to like walk away from something if it does not work for you, because your vision and your concept and your dream is bigger than one location.
And I want to piggyback off of that really quick, because what tends to happen, and we're all victim of it. We saw how much work goes into just creating one waterfall, y'all.
Yeah.
For one property. Okay. You done it. You figured it out. You know everything you need to know about this one piece of property. And guess what? While you're chasing it, let it be a year, let it be 6 months, or however long you're chasing that property, you don't see anything else is going on. There might be other properties that pop on the market. You don't know why, because you're chasing this one.
That's right.
Right? And that's okay when you're in the midst of the deal. But understand that there's real estate everywhere, all over the world. Even in the city that you're doing it, your project in, there are multiple other pieces of real estate that actually might be a better fit for you, right? And so if it, like she said, if a deal doesn't make sense, you don't want to set yourself up for failure, because there might not be, if you do that, there might not be a number 2, a number 3, or a number 4 property, because you have put yourself in such a bind early. Make sure that it works for you, right? And so I appreciate that feedback, because it's so important. I mean, there's so many projects that I've worked on. I mean, even the project here in Maryland, I worked on that project for such a long time, and for it to not happen, yeah, it took me a couple of weeks. Okay, I'm still recovering. But
I was like, "Dad, you all right?" He's like, "I'm great." I was like, "Okay."
I'm all right. It took me a few weeks. You know what I'm saying? I had to bounce back. But what I realized is now when I'm looking at properties, I'm looking at the zoning from the get-go, and I'm realizing there's certain counties that have even more favorable zoning, that if I would have closed on this property, I would have had to go through all these hoops and hurdles that wouldn't have necessarily guaranteed that I could do what I really wanted to do. And there's other adjacent counties that are saying, if you buy this type of asset, you can do exactly what you want to do by right. You know what I'm saying? So you learn so much going through the process. So what I want you all to do is to learn to appreciate the process of what you're going through, right? And the last thing I want to do, because I know I told you 30 minutes and you just put the kids to sleep. So I wanted to make sure, does anyone have any questions for Britt specifically as it pertains to the project that she's working on? Is there anything that you want to know more before she has to roll?
What is a few deals, the questions about just the financing of it? So awesome. And that includes soft costs. But what does the rest of the financing look like? You know, are you like raising debt? Are you, getting investment? What does that look like?
So I'm all equity. So I'm not doing any debt. So I'm raising 7. I'm breaking that up into a first million of like a friends and family round on a convertible note. So people I know, people in the community, my broker, for example, who's my realtor, has been working on this with me for 2 years, is putting his commission back into the deal, right? People who are just really, and again, as I said, like here, there's like a ton of money here, right? And so there are just a lot of people who will personally sort of benefit from this. And in fact, the way that I'm structuring this first round of the $1 million is I'm actually making it like a club, right? So I'm taking the concept of sort of a private members club, and I'm like, I'm inviting you. It's just marketing, but I'm inviting you, you 50 people, you chosen 50 people to invest. And quite frankly, like I don't want to get ahead of myself, but you can raise $1 million like pretty quickly, actually, right? I mean, if you break it up, you sort of break it up into pieces. So I've got about a quarter of the way there before having sort of an LOI signed, which is really great. And I feel like right as soon as we're done, I'll be able to accelerate. So doing that on a friends and family round on a convertible note, we'll get to that later. Damon, you can explain what all that means. And the rest I'll do in hopefully like $1 to $3 million like tranches. And my goal is to not have a ton of investors. That just makes things like super complicated. And hopefully not too few, because I don't want any one party to have too much control. But generally from probably like high net worth family offices, smaller funds, probably not any venture right now, or any like bigger institutional money, but just, you're sort of beholden to a lot of rules at that point. So sort of the next one, I will sort of go bigger as I start to expand. But yeah, does that answer the question?
Yeah, absolutely.
I have a piggyback question off of that question. With the friends and family, how do you divide up like equity, or like how does that work?
Damon, I feel like actually you should answer this question.
Because you're raising it on a convertible note.
Raising it on a convertible note on a 20% discount. So
for the business or for the operating company?
For the business at this point.
Yeah. Okay, go ahead. You first.
No, please. You're much better than I am.
All right. So the friends and family are coming in on a convertible note. That I'm trying to think of the easiest way to describe it.
So do you want me to give it a?
Yeah, give it a first.
Okay. So basically, they're called like convertible instruments, right? So you're not, and we talked about valuation cap earlier, but basically what I'm doing right now is I'm like, okay, give me $100, right? Your $100 doesn't translate to a particular specific amount of like shares yet, because I haven't set a price. I haven't set a value on the company yet, right? If I set a value on the company, and actually this is another story, if I set a value on the company too early, it's a bad deal. I'm sort of disadvantaged, right? Because it might be worth much more. Or some people might not want to come in at a too high a valuation or too low of a valuation, right? So this is basically like an IOU. Is that a good way of putting it? Like, you're going to give me this much money. And at some point, when I've raised enough or when I've set a value on my company, I will owe you X amount of, equity, participation, ownership of the business. But you are going to get, for giving me that money early, right, with like very loose terms, you are going to get, your money will buy more shares, effectively will buy you more than what the next person's will, right? It will convert to a value, but yours will be at a preferred amount. So your $1, right, might be worth $2 for the next person, compared to the other investor.
I like to look at convertible notes kind of like your down payment, like you're putting a deposit essentially for future shares. So if they put in $100 for the convertible, then when the shares are priced at, and it's a 20% discount, then that $100 becomes $120 worth of shares instead.
Exactly. You're just giving someone a better deal down the line for like investing in you early.
Mm-hmm.
And is there like how do you deal with like smaller amounts? Like say you are trying to raise that million and somebody.
Right. Well, what you can do is you can set a minimum, right? So you can say, I am not taking checks less than, listen, sometimes you'll be like, I'll take whatever I can get. But for me, I'm like, I'm not taking checks less than $40,000, $50,000. So you can sort of try to, because what you want to do is not have a billion investors, right? Because that just muddies the water. So you can set a minimum, you can set a maximum. The other thing that I would actually, Damon, you should share the Y Combinator, like breakdown of convertibles, because I think, or is it Y Combinator? Yeah, because I think that they sort of came up with a safe instrument, or the safe instruments, right?
Safe is very similar, which is a simple agreement for future equity.
Yeah.
Which is interesting because
you set a value at a safe.
Yep, you set a value at a safe. It's interesting because you don't often see it for real estate, but it definitely can be done for real estate.
A safe.
Yes, safe or convertible note.
Yeah, but it depends if you're doing like the, what I'm doing is more of
Operating business,
yeah. But I can share all of, I mean, and you have them already, but I think you shared one of your safe term sheets with me. Yep.
Any other questions? That was a good one.
Follow up to that is sort of, what kind of funds do you target, or what kind of, not for the convertible round, but like beyond, like as you go to the market, like, or you said small offices and small family offices and smaller funds, but how do you kind of figure out what kind of investments they are interested in, right? Like, what's the deal size? What kind of investments?
They'll tell you, actually. I mean, that's part, I mean, and Damon, you have more experience fundraising than I do, but they'll, funds and, various investment vehicles, they have a profile, right? So
Yeah.
they might do tech only, right? So I've like spoken to a couple of VCs that are, yeah, but we do tech driven businesses. I'm like, okay, that's fine. Which, by the way, is like kind of what got WeWork. Now, that's the only reason that got WeWork in hot water, but they were purporting to be a tech business and they got these crazy tech valuations. They're real estate leasing. That's what they were, right? So there'll be funds and investors and who do a particular thing, and they have an expertise and like that's their lane, and you'll just learn that, right? Or then there'll be funds that do pre-seed, right? They only do, pre-growth, or they only do growth, or I would say, every investment sort of vehicle has a profile, and you just have to see where yours works or doesn't.
Right. Good question.
Yeah, that is a good question. Because by the way, I asked that, I'm like, oh, but also like take every meeting. even if they don't invest in what you're doing, like they know somebody who does.
Right.
So it's worth, the 15-minute, 20-minute conversation, because they're like, yeah, that's great. That's fabulous. We don't do that. Or, we only do, we're a $300 million fund and we only do this or that. I'm like, okay, great. Like, but I know someone who does what you're doing. So I'm going to connect, have every meeting. It's exhausting, but it will lead to something.
Yep, always does.
Right? It always does. So, and it's always when I'm like, I don't know. Like, no, it will lead. Like, it will lead to it. It will lead to it. Yeah, it's just a lot of work.
There's a lot of work.
That's the full-time job. Like,
any other questions? Anybody else?
And is that you just Google funds?
Is such a good question. And it's one that I like ask a lot. You do a lot of research about various funds, and you can look on Crunch. What is it? Is it Crunchbase?
You can look on Crunchbase, on PitchBook. Deal Flow.
Mm-hmm. Some of them require you to pay, and like sometimes it's worth a subscription to it. Like, it might be worth the $200, however much I just paid for Crunchbase to like raise $7 million. Like, okay, or somebody probably has a subscription. So
if you go to dealroom.co, it gives you pretty much the same info as Crunchbase.
Dealroom.co.
Yeah, and you can get away with not paying for a little bit.
Yeah,
and
by the way, that's what I did with
use it per day, but
that's what I did with Crunchbase, and I was like, you know what? Let me just pay. Like, let me pay for this. It's like, yeah, I'm like, if this helps me get to $1 million, it was worth the $300, right? So, and trust me, I'm like bootstrapping this. Like, I got 3 kids. I'm paying for private school. Like,
big boots.
Big boots. So I'm trying to save every dollar, but sometimes it's worth it. But we can
also add something really quick. Okay, so when folk are looking for investors, like strategies to do so are to look at other hotels or hospitality apps in your industry or in like your sector. So that way you can find out what trends and what investors are a lot that have already invested in them or have interest in that particular industry. But you also want to be mindful of their portfolio because they're not going to invest in another company that competes with the company that's already in their portfolio, but it will at least give you some direction on like who to be reaching out to.
I'm so glad that you said that because you stole the words out of my mouth. There are articles. I just saw an article about Starwood starting this new outdoor brand called Field Work or something like that. And when you look at the article, it then talks about all the other companies and brands that are doing the same exact thing, all the development companies that are helping them do that, and then the investment firms that are also working in it. And that gives you literally 10 different websites to go research and look and say, okay, well, who's investing in them? All right, who invested in them? And it's a rabbit hole. You want to know why I got so many tabs open on my joint when I share it?
Yeah,
because
exactly.
I'm going down that rabbit hole, trying to figure out who's investing in what markets and why. So important.
What is this site again?
No, I said this. I don't know what site you're referring to, but for me, it was an article that was written on Wall Street Journal, and then from there, literally like 10 to 15 different, brands or developers or funds were listed in the article itself.
I mean, I would say also part of the job of fundraising is like you're just constantly researching and reading and scrolling and like mining for information.
And talking and taking meetings and taking pointless meetings, and like some of them are pointless. And then actually I would venture to say that even some of the ones that you think are pointless, later on,
They always do.
Being meaningful for something. Like somebody knows somebody, you go to a conference, like, oh, there's such and such. And then they're standing next to such and such. It's like, oh, okay, let me introduce you to this person. Now you got a whole investor.
Yeah.
I have a question. When you were taking some of the initial meetings, like trying to find the property, and you said that you were basically kind of pitching the vision, did you have like a deck already that like had your branding or?
The
deck. That do you have a whole?
We got that's coming up. The deck is coming, is one of the next classes.
Or now that you have your property, it's like now you have your building, now you're going to.
I have 85 decks and I hate them all. And I am a few days away from version like 87, because it's never ends, and it's an iterative process is like sugarcoating the fuck out of it. Excuse my language. It's a nightmare. And actually no one does like a deck better or faster than Damon. I was like, he's got, this one's perfect. He did it in like a day. So ask him. It's the bane of my existence. I've had so many decks. Just make one. Just make them. The first one's going to be terrible. The 10th one's going to be terrible. Just do it. Just do it.
So you didn't invest in branding in advance.
No.
It's kind of just like you pulled together inspiration.
No, I mean, I have like 80 billion mood boards, and I have a lot of swipe, and I have all that stuff done, and like a lot. But I've like changed the colors in my deck for the 80th time. I would say, unless you have a brand, like, so I have a background in like branding and sort of that stuff. So I'm actually quite specific about it. Unless you have your branding done, I would say make it, I wouldn't say generic, but I would say make it broadly appealing, but that your point of view comes through. And that can come through in so many different ways, right? It can come through in like the images that you use. Like you can still imbue whatever you're doing with your point of view and your aesthetic without investing in like, what is my logo? Because you don't know what your logo, I mean, unless you do, right? But the like brand work, part of what I'm going to raise for is like actually having somebody develop a brand with my, you know, point of view and my direction. But I don't know, Damon, do you agree with that?
1000%. And I saw somebody say Canva, but even before that, yeah, like just getting it on paper is sometimes
It's
good.
hard. I'm not gonna lie, like it's hard, but and I would say also don't I probably waste 75% of my time on decks, like looking at other people's decks. Like have a flow, have a like, and I can share also with you, like, here are the things that you just generally need in a deck, and here's what you wanna, and Damon, I'm assuming you already have that sort of as part of it. Like, here are the notes you have to hit, like, here's the information you need to provide high level, but like, don't spend too much time like comparing yourself or your deck. What was it? Someone said, don't compare someone's like, you know, day 40 to your day 1, right? Like, I've looked at Damon's decks and I'm like, oh, mine is horrible. It's the worst. I'm like, oh, well, that's, you know, he's been doing that for a long time. He's much further along. It's okay. Like, be inspired by it. Don't get caught up in how someone else has done something, because it will actually like drive you crazy. If this is the best advice I could get, like this, if there's any other advice I could give, this is the best advice I give. Don't too much time like losing your mind over it. It's going to change 80 times. Make sure that you're like the core vision and the mission of what you want to accomplish is there. Talk about yourself like in a succinct but sort of thorough way. You know, include your team members if it's relevant, right, to the project. High level on your business plan, right? Don't share too much sort of on the pro forma, like unless they request it from you, but just enough, and just give like a high level, right? But just hit them with the keynotes and then go, but just start something, do something. Don't get caught in the maelstrom horribleness of the deck, because it will.
Yeah.
Damon, I'm like, please look at this. He's like, just send the thing. Just stop it. Most of them are terrible. It's fine.
Hold on real quick.
They're investing in you and they want to know your numbers make sense, right, Damon?
Yep, real quick. I think Latasha had a question. I want to get her question. We got like 5 more minutes. This has been great, by the way.
Yeah.
Start rambling.
No, it's been amazing. So I want to get Latasha's question. I want to get Caitlin's question in real quick before we jump.
Yeah, so real quickly, I just wanted to ask if at a later date we can go through, once you sign your LOI, more of like the lease details, because one of my projects is probably going to be close to similar to like a lease.
Okay.
So I would, really love to hear like more like details when it comes to that, the lease kind of.
Happy to share whatever. If Damon lets me back in.
I'll make that connection.
I'm happy to just go.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Caitlin.
Okay, so my question is similar to Latasha's. I was concerned because I wanted to own the property. I still want to own the property. But everybody is saying to look into a lease option. But my thing is, how do you prevent like whoever owns the property from copying your concept? Is that something that you can prevent in the contract? Or like, for example, we were looking at a property and it needed a lot of work done on it, and we didn't want to put money into it if we knew we couldn't, own it in the future.
That is a really good question.
I'll give you my first stab at that.
Yes.
Number one, owners aren't creative. That's number one. And they ain't got time to operate no business. That's number two. So you might think that they might try and copy what you're doing. It's a lot of work, Kayla. You know that. It's a lot of work, right? A lot of work. So in order for them to copy what you do, and also
Nobody can do what you're doing.
Do what you do, Kaylin. They can't do it. John Jay, can't nobody do what you do. You know, millions of people own hotels. They ain't gonna do it how you gonna do it.
This is the thing that keeps me, I know, Damon, I know we've had this conversation. This is what keeps me up. Like blood drains from my face. I'm like, who's gonna do, is somebody else gonna do this concept for, by the way, I've had so many concepts taken from me, right? Oh my gosh. Like ones that have gone on to be very successful. Craziness. It happens. Okay, whatever. By the way, it happens. Totally happens.
Oh, for sure.
That's fine. But I'm going to still do the thing that I'm going to do, and it's going to be better. And in fact, I'll give you more specific. Okay. So there's a person in Jacksonville. He's like a billionaire owner of the Jaguars, right? And there was a property that, and he's bringing the Four Seasons to downtown, which is amazing. And there's a property out at the beach that I was looking at that I wanted to do. And they sold it to him, whatever. And I like lost my mind. And I was hearing him talk about the concept that he had to sort of connect the Four Seasons downtown that he's doing to the beach property. And I was like, this is my language. He's seen my deck, which by the way, he may or may not have done. Like, who cares? It doesn't matter. What I realized was, you know what? And someone had to calm me down. They're like, no, but he didn't steal your concept. I'm like, ah. That doesn't leave this room, by the way, okay? Because I'm going to get him to invest in what I'm doing. I was like, wait, hold on a minute. First of all, he's not going to do what I'm doing. Only I can do what I'm doing, and only you can do what you're doing. And sometimes it's actually to your advantage that someone else with way more money and more budget is talking about the same shit that you're going to talk about.
Amen.
They're doing the marketing for you. You
put
like
it in your deck. Go ahead and put it in your deck. Okay.
Take it.
The markets, they
market my concept. And in fact, it's better. I'm like, oh, well, what I'm out here selling, like, isn't going to sound like a wild and crazy idea to y'all, because homeboy over there is pitching my concept. Anyway, it's not the same thing. It's totally different. But I'm just saying, like, in general, I'm like, oh, this is tailwinds. Like, this is great for me. Again, it's not the same thing, but only you can do what you're going to do.
I love it.
So
I love it. Oh my gosh.
Think about how, yes, my child is asking me to be a little bit more quiet. And maybe there's an opportunity for collaboration.
Yep.
You never know. Maybe there's an opportunity for investment.
Man, this was good.
I'm not saying not to protect your IP and to be mindful and to be careful, but don't be scared.
Right. Woo. All right, we at 10 o'clock, man. We did it. This was good. This was good. Thank you so much, Fred. You going through the process, you giving us real time.
See these bags under these eyes?
This was amazing. We appreciate the time.
Oh, I'm so very honored, and it's hilarious that I think I know anything, but I'm just going through it, and whatever Damon asked for, I quickly and humbly, say yes, because he really is a change agent and a catalyst for amazing things. And can tell you this is time very, very well spent. So, and thank you for inviting me, Damon. Appreciate you.
Thank you for coming, man. This was a great class. We really enjoyed having you. So thank you so much for coming. But that's all we got, man.
Send me some waterfall homework. I could use it.
I'm gonna shoot you some waterfall homework for sure. For sure.
I'm
Talk
impressed.
to you soon, and then I hope to have you back before the end of it. I think you're going through your LOI process, so maybe we can have you back in a couple of weeks and just give us an
Yeah,
update. on where you are.
hopefully it should be done. Hopefully it will be like I signed it and it's good. DocSend. Can I say one last thing? I'm so sorry. I know we're done.
Yep.
Send your decks vis-a-vis DocSend so you can track who sees them.
And it captures emails as well.
That's what I mean.
Yep. Captures email.
It will get sent out to so many people. It will get forwarded, and hopefully it gets forwarded and you can see all the people who've seen it. And that is a really great way to just, it's your CRM, right? For your lead management.
And follow up. Yep. Great anecdote. Man, this was great. Love you, Britt.
Love you, man. Thank you all.
We love you,
Hopefully it's
Academy.
helpful. Please hit me if I can be helpful directly. Feel free to share my contact.
Okay, we'll do. We'll do. All right, y'all.
Thank you.
Thank you all so much.
Good night.
Bye.
All right,
Bye.
thank you. Have a good one.